Hi, so my name's Stephanie Taylor. I'm one of the organizers of this event, and thank you all very much for being here. I'm really honored to look at the group of people and to see all of these thought leaders and innovators who've come from far and wide to be here. So thank you very much. So first, I'm just going to introduce you to Oliver Zimmerman. Oliver is the CEO of Condair Group, and Nortec is part of that. And it's really thanks to Condair Group, Nortec, and then some of our sponsors that this is even happening. So with that, you'll hear more from me tomorrow, but I'm going to turn you over to Oliver Zimmerman.
As the sponsor, it's my honor to welcome everybody to this year's Healthcare Symposium at the Medical School of Harvard. It is Condair's vision to provide productivity, sustainability, and health through air and water. And while the productivity part still accounts for about 80% of our business, it's really the health part where we invest in research and in marketing. There is a lot of talk about outdoor air quality, in particular in Asia. But I'd like to remind everybody that we spend 80 to 90% of our time actually in indoor environments. And many times the indoor climate or the indoor air quality is actually worse than the outdoor air quality. And we forgot, I think, what buildings are actually here for, what the main purpose of buildings is. And just think of the story of the three piglets. I mean, the main purpose is to protect people. And we got to come back to that. And our aim is to ensure a natural, healthy indoor climate. And when we actually look at this, that implies a lot. I always argue, and it's a bit provocative, I know, I always argue that vaccinations and antibiotics have come to their limits, that evolution is striking back, and that we have to stop fighting symptoms, but rather start actually finding the root causes and address those. And as the global leader in humidification, we try to lead by example, and in our brand new facility in the north of Germany, we actually guarantee a relative humidity of 40 to 60%, a temperature range between 22 and 26 degrees centigrade, and a CO2 level below 800 ppm. And all this comes at almost zero energy consumption. We could have reached zero energy by actually investing a bit more in insulation, but that didn't pay back anymore. So of course it was also a financial investment. But I think it proves that you can actually optimize energy and a healthy indoor climate. And that creates an environment in which we have healthy workplaces that also ensure high productivity and performance actually. So therefore, we are very proud to be the sponsor of this Healthcare Symposium. And it is my pleasure now to introduce Dr. Jeffery Thompson. Thank you. He introduced himself as Jeff, and he actually made it very easy for me because Naomi had given me his biography. And I read through that, and man, it was impressive. I was afraid though that I would have had to ask him afterwards to translate it to me. I just give you the quick introduction though. So he's an executive advisor and chief executive officer emeritus at Gunderson Health System. He is a trained pediatric intensivist and neonatologist and served as Gunderson's chief executive officer from 2001 to 2016. But then, as I said, he made it really easy for me. And so rather than continuing here with this impressive list, I'd like to read the mission of Gunderson to you. We distinguish ourselves through excellence in patient care, education, research, and through improved health in the communities we serve. So he ran a very successful enterprise in pediatric healthcare. But he also told me that he was on miscellaneous boards that are globally recognized for what they do to improve actually quality, indoor and outdoor. And he's also having a lovely family, a wonderful family, he told me. Then it got really interesting. He loves traveling. He spends a lot of time with the family traveling. He's been to 39 countries, and he's on the over 65 soccer club in North Carolina and plays competitively all over the world. So we're welcoming Dr. Jeff Thompson. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me. That was a lovely introduction. I have my iPad up here. It's not my emails. Honest, actually it's a soccer game that I'm watching. It's really good. No, I'm a pediatrician who also was the CEO of a health system. My goal for this, and I'm sorry that people are talking, but that'll be a good incentive, or people that are standing, it'll be a good incentive for the guy talking to move along crispy. I should have had supper. It'll be a good incentive for me to move along rapidly. We are at Harvard, so I have to assume you're all brilliant, right? And none of you look like you're just out of school. Not many as old as me, but not just out of school. So I'm going to move along rather quickly on this. My purpose is try to give you a little insight into how I organized our business, billion-dollar business, 3 states, 7 hospitals, 65 clinics, and why we did what we did on our road to accomplish things. So that's what it's about. The advantage you have is that for the few of you that may be interested afterwards, like Oprah, who is my cousin, no, she's not. I brought along gifts, but it's not a car. It's just a book. Our foundation, I wrote a book, and our foundation owns that book, and I brought some for the group to have. So there will be some out on the table when I'm done. So what I want to do is hit last year a little bit. Oh, that was quick. So a couple slides from last year's program. Deming says we don't have to change. We can die. It's an option. We had a couple things that were important that I thought were important, breaking down barriers between different people trained in different areas. And of course, one of the things that Oliver pointed out, he was doing several things at a time. He used "and" multiple times. I think that's very important in healthcare. We know why it's hard to move things along. It's people, and it's all these pieces of it. My contention, this is a very cliche-ish culture eating strategy, but people, you know, you're experienced enough. You know that if you don't move the people, you don't move anything. You're just not going to get very far. You can hand out edicts, you can do a lot of things, but in our cultures, most of the time, it takes a lot. So this is the foundational piece of our billion-dollar company. This is our strategic plan. You say, gee, you put your strategic plan out in the public. I wish every healthcare organization in the country would follow this strategic plan. Am I completely killing your camera here? I'm wandering around. I'm sorry, man. If everybody used this, we'd be great. One of the things I want you to look at is we're an organization. We had to compete with the Mayo Clinic. We had to compete with United Healthcare 8 times, 100 times our size, tons of competition. This is a completely outward-facing strategic plan. Does it say make billions of dollars? Does it say hit a margin? Does it say get bigger than the rest of the world? Doesn't say any of that. What it says is we're going to improve the health and well-being of patients and our communities. So it talks about something out there. We said if we're going to get the brightest and the best, we're going to compete for the best employees, of course we have to pay them competitively, you have to have decent benefits, but if we have a purpose that they can really lean into, then we're going to move from 80%, you have employees that work 80% of their capacity. They keep their job, they're fine, but fine's not going to cut it long term. If everybody's just doing fine, your organization's going to swoon. What you need is more working at 100 or 120% of their capacity. That really moves you along. I will argue that having great goals, distinguish ourselves through excellence, not mediocrity. Mediocrity in healthcare is morally indefensible. You can't be average. If you're average, then half of your patients, all your patients should go to all those other places that are doing better. And the truth is, if you're average, you know that you're outdated almost instantly because things get better and better. So it's just, that was not acceptable. Okay, wow, there's a goal. Yeah, if the goal is finally getting a new iPad, that would be the goal. So it's an outward facing, even down in the values. Values are very important. I refer to them here. They're a list. We're going to live the values. I'm going to show you how you're going to live the values. And if you look at all of our strategies, they're all outward looking. Quality and safety through the eyes of the patients. Outstanding patient experience. A great place to work that embraces a passion for carrying a spirit of improvement. So from the very beginning, you set them up to say, we have to improve, we have to get better. What about finances? Does it say a 3% operating margin? How many of you are inspired by saying, we're going to move from a 3.1 to a 3.2% operating margin, and that'll be really good? If you're not inspired, think about the frontline people. They don't care. They don't care about your operating margin. You might say they should. Yep, most of them don't. It said, we're going to make care more affordable for our patients, our employers, and our community. And you say, yeah, maybe it's because you're a pediatrician, you don't really understand that finances are important to businesses. My finances ended up great. Our quality went to the top 5% in the country, patient experience top 10%. In a town of 55,000, we had 25,000 people apply for jobs every year. We put away more savings in the 14 years I was a CEO than the 114 years before that, combined. And yet, every year for 14 years, our fee increase was less than the year before. And we lost $100 million differential in the fact that more people went on Medicaid and Medicare and lost commercial insurance. So despite those headwinds, we saved money and didn't take it out of the people's hide. We grew for purpose, not just as a goal. I spent some time on that because it was foundational. We communicated that. We made decisions over and over. Every talk I had with managers, this was up there, and I explained why we're doing based on that. It was a really important piece. This is where we are out in Wisconsin. We teach. We take care of patients across a large area. I have this sustainability. I just came from the Clean Med conference, something that many of you should consider attending. It's a great conference, 700 to 1,000 people from around the country in healthcare, all focused on improving the health and well-being of their communities through focusing on the environment, both inside and outside the clinical spaces. But the strategic plan was a foundational piece that looked at what we're going to do. Now, to do that, you had to follow those values. The values we said we'll compromise on a lot of things, we'll innovate a lot of things, we won't change the values. And we won't change who's responsible to live the values. The CEO, all the docs, all the nurses, all the administrators, finance, same set of values. To accomplish the values, it's going to take courage, discipline, and durability. It isn't complex. It's just really hard. Here's one of the hard things. You get the medical staff, who didn't necessarily have administrative authority, but have a lot of authority in healthcare, to come along. We said, you want to work at our place? You want to be part of us? Great. Here's what the organization will deliver to you in regards to focusing on excellence and good communication and managing change and adequate compensation. But here's what you have to do. You might be the best neurosurgeon in the country, but if you can't focus on superior patient care, if you can't treat everybody with respect and take ownership, this is probably not the place for you. You should probably go someplace else. I had a call one morning. Early in the morning, I get a call. It's one of the neurosurgeons. Brilliant young man. Outstanding outcomes. Fabulous outcomes. We measure outcomes really hard. Great outcomes. He said, Jeff, I might be in trouble. I said, why would you be in trouble? He said, I just had a run-in with the security guard. What was the deal? He's putting a ticket on my car. Where's your car? It's over by the East Building. Where by the East? It turns out it's right where the fire lane was. So you park where the fire truck. So, wow, if the fire alarm rang, I was going to come out and move it. That's not how it works. I said, but he's putting a ticket. I said, why'd you get so mad at him? He's putting a ticket on my car. I said, no, it doesn't cost anything, right? They don't cost anything, because I like you to afford it. But I said, it doesn't cost you anything. Why were you so mad at him? I said, it just ticked me off. So what happened? He said, well, I told him he should get a job that's useful, and I make more in a month than he does in 5 months. Now, that's me and a neurosurgeon. You have people in your organization behave badly. What do you do with them? Do you fire them? Behave badly and fire them? Well, the organization's responsibility is to try and build people. So my response to him, when he said, are you going to fire me, was, it's up to you. If you apologize to this guy, if you send a note to his boss immediately, because of course it's been 20 minutes, so everybody in the 7,000 know about it, and you commit to behaving better, we're all in. We'll work with you every single day. We'll make this successful. We're all in. But if you can't do that, if you think you're above the part of the values that says treating everybody with respect, you might as well put a sign in your yard. He says, I put $5 million on the books last year. I said, you did. And I appreciate all the hard work you did. Appreciate the $5 million. I appreciate the great outcomes. But if you can't treat everybody with respect, because I can't have him coming in at 7:30 in the morning, destroying a nurse, who then has 11 and a half hours to make mistakes on your loved ones. It's not fair. It's not fair to her. It's not fair to the patients. This won't happen. It's a model for one of the biggest problems in healthcare and in leadership in general, is short-term thinking. Short-term, so much easier to give that guy a tongue lashing and just say, behave better, knowing fully well he wouldn't, and be on with it. And then I'd keep my billings, and I'd keep the neurosurgery department from getting so angry at me. Short-term thinking says that's the way. Long-term thinking, we eventually found another person who treats people well. We didn't destroy the nursing staff or all those other patients. Long-term, we're a stronger organization that would build ever-increasing quality and outcomes. Easy? Not easy. Not easy. I didn't say following the values were easy, but it takes some courage to say what you're going to live by and discipline to follow through. One of the most important things that most of you already know is that there's straight lines and boxes of the org chart, but there's the influence chart, different than the org chart. Another opportunity to have discipline. If you have a person in the middle there who's a star, she is smart, she is capable, she manages her people, other people flock to her, influences people all over the place, up, down, sideways. If that person's a troll, big problem. Same thing. Same thing. Huge influence. This is one of the mistakes I made, for those of you that look at the book. It's one of the biggest mistakes I made as an early CEO. I thought I could fix all these people. Yeah, I could fix tiny babies that weighed 500 grams. I can fix 2-year-olds that get run over by a car. Certainly I could fix a very bright, very capable senior administrator. Yeah, well, I failed at that a whole bunch of times. And who suffered? Did I suffer? Well, I'm annoyed. But all the people that they were influencing suffered. So this is a discipline we have. If we're responsible for people, we have to be really responsible for all the people. And we have to have the courage to take this stuff on and the discipline to follow through. This is from Maureen Visigliano, a Bostonian. When she was the CEO of IHI. The key is we can't expect our staff to treat our customers, our patients, they're not treated with respect, with caring, if they're not connected to. I mean, it's obvious. We know that makes a lot of sense. But you've been in enough organizations, you know that isn't always the case. It's not easy to do, but it's important to put a commitment. And when, as a CEO, I portioned out my time and I said, how am I going to really connect? Not send an email out once in a while, but really connect to my staff. How are we going to treat everyone with respect? Not just those of us that made more money. How do we do this to build a culture so that 24/7, 365, your customers are taken care of by the staff, whether you're there or not? It's a big problem. Here's one of the things we did for senior leaders, managers, directors. Instead of having a person who's responsible for these people evaluate them, we evaluated as teams. And the person would say, here's my guy, and he's really bright and does all these things, blah, blah, blah. And everybody would sit around the table and say, yeah, he does all those things. He's high performer, he's high potential. We're going to move him up. He is great. And then the next person said, well, here's this other woman on my team. She's great too. She does all these things. And the people sitting around the table said, no, she's not. She's really mean. She's terrible. She never finishes a thing. She only does stuff when she's around you. Around the rest of us, she's terrible. And never knew that. He didn't know that. And so there's some learning, but there's also responsibility. So then I turn as CEO to the rest of the team and say, here's the deal. We know that she's not doing quite as well as we had hoped, but it's all of our responsibility to make her better. Not just his, all of ours. All of ours. Because her shadow is all of our responsibilities. So this is about living your values. It doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen about giving speeches. It talks about building systems that help you live your values. We have to push into new ground. If you take a values-based people, the way to innovate and move forward, in my opinion, has three major pieces. One is getting close enough to the work. In healthcare, that'd be pretty easy, right? You think I can get senior people out of their C-suite and get them out and walk the floors and see their folks? Very difficult. Very hard. It is unusual for people to do that on a regular basis. But when you can do that, it's one of the great joys when we have outside consultants come in and we can take them right to the frontline work, whether they're architects or engineers or pharma or whatever. As we get closer to the work, they understand the moral imperative. I argue that you need structure. You know, the smartphones weren't built by 7 guys in somebody's basement juggling Nerf balls. They were built by hard work, thoughtful innovation, teams of engineers and scientists and all kinds of people building towards a goal to accomplish things. I don't tell the staff how to get there. I say how, I point out, here's where we're going. I say, here's how we're going to treat each other, and then turn them loose. So there's structure. Not freedom to treat anybody the way you want, not the opportunity to go in any direction. Same set of values, same set of goals. When you start working with partners outside of your area, this holds for individuals, for teams. If you have the same values, you can work with each other. If you have the same goals, you end up going in the same direction. If you have the same values and goals, you don't have to have identical cultures. Same values and goals, you can get there. So the culture of your firm and that of the hospital, some other place, doesn't have to be the same. You don't have to make it the same. Make sure the values are lining up. Make sure the goal is the same. And then you're going to make terrific progress. Here's an example. Many of you know a lot about this kind of work, probably more than I do. 2008, and part of our work to say, we have to take care of the community. This is the outside air part of it. We said, we're not doing so well. One of the first things was to measure how we're doing. In 2008, we measured the amount of particulate matter we were putting in the atmosphere by the coal that was burned for our electricity, or the natural gas for all that, and we're putting 435,000 pounds of particulate matter into the air that our babies, our asthmatics, our COPD patients, our patients were going to breathe. That wasn't okay. That wasn't okay. We're putting 73 million pounds of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year. We're a healthcare organization. And for a pediatrician, burning coal, I mean, pediatricians worked on getting rid of mercury years ago because it's a terrible neurotoxin for babies. When you burn coal, mercury goes into the environment. We had 2 pounds of coal, 2 pounds of mercury going into the environment. 2 pounds, 2 pounds, isn't that much. 2 pounds of mercury can pollute hundreds of acres of water, get on the soil. It's a bad thing. We were doing this, we're a healthcare organization. We said we're not going to do that. So we set a goal. We set a goal by 2014. By 2014, we're going to be 100% powered by renewables that we own. So we can lower the cost of care, we can improve the local economy, and we can decrease our environmental footprint. So this is back to the "and" that Oliver is talking about. It's not one thing or the other. You can do both. You can do both. You have to think long term. Think long term, not short term, not the next month or quarter. You think long term and you can do that. I'm going to show you how we did it. So by 2016, I just come back from the climate talks. As the only U.S. healthcare provider to speak in the blue zone in the climate talks because we had accomplished so much. Big corporations saying by 2030 we're going to be 30% less. By 2050, 50% less. They're making these pledges, which is fabulous. It was absolutely great. And we had got down to 95% less on greenhouse gases and particulate discharge in that amount of time. So by 2016, by 2014, of October 2014, we did get our goal of our first day of producing more renewable energy that we owned than we did that. You say, how in the world? Why in the world did you, as well all the healthcare leaders say, where you have a death wish on your career? I mean, it sounds like a good way to lose your job. But we believed what all the things that have come out of the Lancet Commission, many people that have studied, this is going to be one of the greatest threats to our health of the century. And we can do something about it. You don't wait for the government. You don't wait for somebody else to figure it all out. You just roll up your sleeves and get going. So here's what we did. And this will surprise none of you in the room. We started with conservation. We started with conservation because I have to go to my board. I have to convince them this is a good thing to do. So what I did is I took $2 million out of our operating budget and invested in conservation. Really sexy stuff. Pumps, motors, engineers wandering around with clipboards and stopwatches and gauges and little boxes of stuff. I don't even know what was in it. And looking at things. But it was just stunning. So you drive by our campus that time, the newest building, built in 2003. So this is 2008. 2003 is a fancy building. Glass, steel, looks like the nicest building, right? We did our energy audit, we recommissioned that building. Complete stink. It was so terrible. It was so terrible. It was one of the worst. So we said, well, it's good. So train company and General Electric and us, we dig through this building. Engineers went to the roof of the building. It's an outpatient building. Giant fans, big as half the end of this room. 3 of them, running 24/7, 365, giving super duper air exchanges every minute of the year since 2003. Nobody's in there after 6 o'clock at night. No, I mean, it was a Homer Doe. The engineer went over, turned the knob, click, click, changed the timing. We saved $19,000 just like that. Just like that. It was every year thereafter. That $2 million I invested, I got back $1.2 million every year. So when I go to a place and the CFO would kind of turn up his nose and say, I don't think about you. You're probably one of these long-haired, sandal-wearing guys of the 70s. So that might be true, but I still have good outcomes. Here's $2 million, turns into $1.2 million. You tell me what else you have in your portfolio that's doing that well. They didn't. So you start with things that are going to work. Incremental change is better than no change. You didn't get there in one bite. So we said incrementally, well, and then we did some other things. We did a wind turbine with a big construction company. We did a landfill biogas with the city or the county. You can't work with government? We can work with government. The government is not a person. It's zillions of people. And a bunch of them
are bright and careful and caring. And we just find those people and we work with them. Another one, biomass boiler. We're in Wisconsin. Do we have the solar that California does? We don't. We have hardwood lumber mills. They get done with the wood and there's all these wood scraps that rot on the ground. We had them shipped to us. We bought a very high-tech biomass boiler, burns the stuff at 1800 degrees, water vapor comes out the top. We take that steam and heat the place. We take it and we drive it through a generator, cogen, of course, you all know that's not a surprise to any of you. The electricity from that runs a giant geothermal field under the parking lot. Very efficient. And then the thing you don't know, thought you knew all this, didn't you? But I knew I'm coming to a bunch of engineers, so I could give you something. And then we take the steam, the last bit of the steam, still hot, and we sterilize our red bag waste. So the red bag waste turns to normal waste. We save $1 zillion a year on that. You start stacking up the savings. So I can go and say, this isn't about polar bears or even about climate change. This is about lowering the cost of care, improving the health of our community, improving our local economy. We pounded that over and over and over. And even we built a brand new hospital, I'm going to show you in a minute. We were still able to keep pushing forward. Now, I know, chemical, there's at least one chemical engineer in here. Where is she? I chatted with her. Right. Oh, she heard I was talking and left. Sorry. What is, this is a quiz part, only quiz. What is the ideal ratio of cow manure to pizza grease to make methane? Yeah, you didn't think you could learn anything from a pediatrician. See? Fooled you again. Madison, Wisconsin area had $5 million of stimulus money to abate phosphorus. They had no idea what to do with it. We said, we got an idea. We can use your $5 million. We took that $5 million, put it into a $13 million dairy digester, took all this cow manure, learned from Europe that organic food waste improves the production, and again, big batch engineers within our organization, works out all the details, and now we start taking food grease from the landfill, charging them to put it in our dairy digester, which helps our dairy digester. So we're making money on that switch. The methane comes out, and we're making so much methane, we're going to have to put another motor on this thing. And it's good for the business, it's good for the community, and it's good for Gunderson. Generating renewable electricity that offsets our need. So our amount of coal that's being burned for Gunderson, disappearing. Amount of natural gas from Texas or Oklahoma that's coming that we burn. Not that I have anything against Texas. I actually have a lot against Texas. But I don't want to spend the money, so I didn't. So everything I can save on that helps me serve the community better. So conservation moved along. What about the money? So the CFO over here is still saying, what about the money? Well, here's the money. You got to think differently. You have to think long term. We took not money from the GI department, not from the cardiologist, we took it out of our savings. We took it out of the stocks and bonds, T-bills, our usual things, and we put it into energy infrastructure. And with that conservation and all those other things we did, we ended up getting a 10 or 12% return when our other portfolio got 5.8. Now that was 2007 and 8 was in the middle of that too, so that took a beating in there, but that's how investments go. We stopped investing in fossil fuels, of course, and joined a variety of other folks who are working on this, I'll point out Green Health Exchange in a minute. As a pediatrician, one of the most important things is what's happening to our children. If that's not enough stimulus for you to get going, just improve the environment and make money, here is. We have all these drugs, all these chemicals that are out in the environment. We know now that these chemicals in the environment that we breathe in, either inside or outside, that we get from the soil and the water, change your function of your genetic code. Now, it doesn't change your DNA, but it changes the function of your DNA, your genetic code throughout your life. Methylations, the histones that are on there, these change, and it changes how you react to stresses, how you fight cancers, how you do that stuff, all the rest of your life, and it's passed on to the next generation. Not all of it, but 10% of those changes are passed on in egg and sperm. We know it goes at least 2 generations down in humans. It goes 100 generations in plants. So if you don't have enough stimulus already, that should bring you along. So what do we do about that? We start re-engineering our waste stream. We re-engineered our waste stream. We took our hazardous pharmaceutical waste from 17 barrels a month down to 1 barrel a month and made money doing it. We're actually down to a half a barrel a month. Fancy, no, actually nothing fancy. This is basic lean processing, go to the source, reorganize your work, get the nurses to talk to the supply chain people and move all the way through. But all this stuff that either gets incinerated or in healthcare, one of the worst things, goes down the drain. I mean, the federal government, you can still probably find it on some website, said throw stuff down the drain. I mean, things coming out of the sewer plant, active cancer drugs, active pharmaceuticals such as hormone drugs, active antibiotics come out of your sewer treatment plant. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. Here's my construction. I know I promised you a construction thing. Here's my construction thing. So, since we had a not so bright CEO, we thought, gee, we just had a giant economic downturn. How about if we build a new hospital? Should we be able to get it cheap? We needed a replacement hospital. The other CEOs had kicked it down the road. We really needed to do it. And so I was looking to make it very environmentally sound. We had architects come in, and I like these architects. They were at the time with L.B. Beckett, and they were terrific, and they were thoughtful and nice, and they liked me and I liked them, and we started going, and we got down to this what was going to be our energy goal for the new hospital, and it's filled of ICUs and surgery and emergency departments, so it's high tech, going to be costly. So they came in and said, you know what? The average in the country, 253. We think we can do this for 230. I said 230. And you're in a northern climate, so that's a stretch. I said, how about 80? They said, come on, man. You can't do 80. I said, no, 80. In Europe, they do 80. They do 80. I said, oh, it's people in Europe. They're nuts. I mean, people sweat until the temperature's 85, 90 in the thing. They open the windows, for God's sakes. Who would ever open a window in a hospital? And they said they're crazy people, and they don't have any regulation over there. I'm pretty sure they have regulation in Europe. I said, but I'll give you a break. I'll move to 115. I'll go to 115. You okay with 115? They said, it is impossible in Wisconsin with all ICUs. You cannot do that. Can't be done. I said, well, that's too bad. I said, okay, 230 then? You're good at 230? I said, no. I'm just getting different architects. Well, not only did the architects turn white, all of our senior staff turned white because they loved them too. And they were nice people. And they're very smart. And we thought we could work with them. But they weren't going to work hard enough, in my opinion. And so I said, all right, let's get somebody different. And then they turned out they had more ideas. I said, maybe we can do something. They start jumping around. I said, I'll put the geothermal thing in. We'll put air ducts that you can drive a double-decker bus through. I mean, we'll do all these things to try and make it better for you. So they worked their chops off. They pounded it. This building opened 2 years ago, and it came in at 140 opening week. Okay, 140 is still 90 better than they thought they could do. And that's without all the re-engineering we did. And now it's functioning in the low 120s. 121, 122, 119, right in that range is what our measurements are now. We haven't got it to 115. Now, as an ICU guy that deals with tiny babies and lots of calculations, I have to reveal how I came up with 115 was I completely just made it up. I just made it up. I mean, I read what people had done. I knew what the average was. I knew there's all these moving parts that I have any idea. I mean, all the other people are much smarter than me. But I wanted to set a goal. It's just like our goal to get from 2008 to 2014 to be 100% powered by renewables. We just made it up. We didn't know how to get there. We thought we were going to do a big thing in the Mississippi River. That didn't ever work. After committing to this hospital, a big economic downturn, our major competitor in town, that I won't mention, but it could be the Mayo Clinic, decided to get out of inpatient behavioral health because there's no behavioral health issues in the middle of an economic downturn. But they shut their unit down. And so I went to our board and said, what are we going to do? So a third of the board says, well, I guess we could follow their lead. I said, right. And then what happens? And then families come in with 20-year-olds in psychiatric crises, and we're going to tell them to get in the car and drive 100, 200 miles? That's not okay. Do you make money in behavioral health? You don't. So in the midst of, after committing to the biggest build in the history of Western Wisconsin in healthcare, the building I just showed you, and after the economic downturn, I talked the board into building a new behavioral health hospital. And we got the architects to build one that was so patient and staff friendly that instead of nurses leaving, the nurses coming in. And when we toured that building, everything I ever built, ever got done, always people from the community would say, well, there goes my healthcare dollars, there goes my healthcare. 2,000 people came through and 0 people said this was terrible. They all said thank you. My mother, my brother, my son, my wife, my somebody, they all had somebody. We all have somebody touched by behavioral health issues. Here's the last one that they really thought I had a death wish. There is no good health without economic health. I can't take abject poverty with no hope of economic improvement and get the health of that population up where it needs to be. This company, LHI, was the fastest growing company, high-tech company, great jobs, gone from 0 to 300, 400, and 800 jobs in our little community. High-paying jobs, outside money coming in, it was great. Biggest philanthropist in town was the new owner and his wife of this company. Great. Rebuilding the downtown. And then his money, his investors said, we're done 5 years and out. And the only people who were willing to buy it were the people on the East Coast. And they're going to move the whole company on. So he came to me and my senior vice president, who was trained as a mechanical engineer. And they said, what can you do? I said, what do you mean, what can we do? I said, well, might be a stretch, but is there anything you can do? So we looked at it. So to shorten the story, after all this other stuff, I talked the board into taking 25% of all of our savings and do a private equity buy into this company to save them and keep them in town. My argument was the money in savings in a not-for-profit healthcare is the community's money, not my money. It's not the board's money, it's the community's money. And I can think of no better use for it right now than to save that company and keep it in town. Now, did we do we did due diligence. We had board members that worked day and night on it. We hired outside people. We didn't go into blind. It wasn't a guess. We bought 48% of that company. Kept it in town. Thought I'd have to hold it 3 years. Only held it 16 months. Sold it to somebody that was going to promise to build it. They have built it. It's now over 2,000 people in that community, working in that place. It is built, it is stable, it is doing wonderful things. That person and his wife have gone on to reinvest their money into the community, to build the community. And, as a private aside among friends, Gunderson made an inappropriate amount of profit on that. It was wonderful. I paid, what did it pay for? It paid for most of that. So it wasn't about me making my quarterly profits look better. All kinds of risk. It was about serving the mission of the organization. You find partners. We're not the only ones that are doing this. Here's a Health Anchor Network. These people around the country, I'll call out Dignity Health. They have $80 million out in community loans right now They make 5% on some, they make 0% on others. But their portfolio serves the health and well-being of the community. You can look up Health Anchor Network and you'll read about all these kinds of folks. We couldn't get the big purchasing GPOs to behave well, so this group of health leaders in the country put together our own buying group. Are we ever going to become a dominant thing like Vizient or Premier Fires? No. But both of those giants, 1,000 times our size, are changing their behavior because of us. Not because of our power, but because we have enough people here, and Kaiser's probably going to be in soon, to change the face of that. So it's values. It's values. It's your values lived consistently. It's a value so in the middle of the night, your staff know exactly what to do. In the middle of a negotiation, 1,000 miles away, they know exactly what to do. They don't have to call. They don't have to call all the time. I should probably tell you all these really brilliant things that I said. But here's one of my favorite stories. It's Friday afternoon. I mean, Friday afternoon, maybe everybody in your organization's leaning in, but we have a few people to take Friday afternoon off. There's nobody in the executive area. I was speaking someplace, the other senior vice president someplace in Missouri, and an oncology doctor walked in after coming out of the room with one of his patients. And he had said, we need to work on your treatment thing, and the guy wasn't interested. We need to work on your treatment, the guy wasn't paying attention. You need to work on his fiance says, I don't think he's interested. Pat says, the doc says, what is he interested in? The guy turns and says, I want to get married. I want to get married. We all know you're dying of oral cancer. You're dying of cancer. 35, 6 years old. You're dying of cancer. I'm trying to give you treatment to keep you alive and keep you functioning. He says, I want to get married. Well, I said, I want to get married today. It's Friday afternoon. So he walked into administration, but it says administrative services on it. And a young vice president, responsible for the region, nothing to do with radiation oncology, stands up and says, can I help you? He says, no, I'm looking for Dr. Binns. He says, no, she's not here today. I can help. He says, no, you can't help. This is craziness. He says, yeah, I do crazy. Try me. The guy says, I told him the story. Brian Erdman says, yeah, we can do that. Following the lead from his CEO, he had no idea how he was going to do it, by the way. No idea. He says, we can do that. Give me a minute. Gets on the phone, starts calling, train leaves the station. I mean, somebody went to the volunteer flower shop and said, we need all those flowers. Took them all. Said, somebody will pay for them. They went to the kitchen and said, in 2 hours, we need a cake. I knew he took two cakes. There's going to be a lot of people. We know somebody in CT that sings, somebody in the foundation plays the piano. We need somebody to drive to Winona, Minnesota to get her dress, and somebody to go to La Crescent and get the license done, and a doctor has to sign it, so we grabbed one of the doc's board members and signed the doc. In 2.5 hours, these people got married. 2.5 hours. No, and it was fabulous, and there are tears, and there's videographers, and there's all these people, all volunteer, all part of our organization. Nobody called me. Nobody called the senior vice president. Nobody thought to ask. Didn't have to. They knew the values. They knew the values of the organization and said, this is who we are. This is what we do. We'll figure out this. The rest is little stuff. You say, well, you might have lost a little money, time, production. That story was told at IHI to 5,000 people in person and 15,000 online. Maureen Bizignano told it in 6 or 8 different international. Gunderson's approach to values made a difference in many people's lives. So in summary, it's not about ego. If you live by values, it isn't somebody's ego. It's the well-being of the patient or the staff. If our senior people are super protected, the front line feels less protected. They're afraid. If you tolerate, and for senior people, this is the hardest. What you tolerate, you support. If we're at a meeting, somebody trashes somebody else. If you don't say something, you're complicit. That's so hard. If you allow things to go on in the organization and you don't change it, you're supporting of that. That is so hard. If you want to build a culture of positive movement where everybody knows the values, you start living this. This is hard. We have probably all hired people who say, why are we hiring this guy? He holds people accountable, he gets results. That's good. That's good, that's a part of the equation. But holding accountable is only half of it. You want to get more than that 80% I talked about? You want to get 140%? Then be responsible for their growth. Remember that 9 box I showed you? Finding out what their performance was is part of it. And then making everybody else responsible for their development. That's the important part. Finances and facilities. They're tools. Again, CFOs are not necessarily tools. Some are. But they're tools. They're not the ultimate goal. You want to inspire people. You want to do great things. Of course you have to nail your finances. We nailed our finances. And everybody else was doing crazy things. We had solid finances. We did fine. Because we had discipline. We stayed with them. That doesn't mean we did short-term stupid things in the name of finances. Back to Charles Darwin. The problem solves itself. Companies that are going to survive, quality, productivity, service. None of that says making next quarter's financial targets. Of course we have to make those. We have to make things over time. I'm a pediatrician, now a grandfather of this kid, puddling in our creek. You want to inspire people? No one thing's going to inspire all your folks. But my inspiration for all that environmental things, for our quality things, for building an organization where people focus on the well-being of each other and those we're serving, was about the next generation. How do we build something that's going to last? It's about the next generation. I'm happy to take questions. I'm happy to take questions. I'm interested in your thoughts, your challenges, disagreements. You can write me an email. Praise I'll take right now. I did mention I have this book I wrote when I stepped down from the CEO. I wrote a book about values-based, and some of these stories are in there. It's about 40 stories, not just mine, industry, education, a variety of places. And as you leave, out on the table, there'll be stacks of these books. So people that want to take a book, you're welcome to do that. If you're going to read it, that'd be great. I gave some to a bunch of medical students right after the book came out. I'm sure they stayed up all night reading it, but the next day there's at least a dozen on eBay. So for the good of it, you just wait a week anyway, and it's going to be so it looks better. But the books will be out on the table if you want that. And boy, thanks for your attention, especially the people that had to stand. I appreciate your interest. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take questions. Any questions?
Are you going to be here tomorrow?
I can't believe you believe all that stuff. I am going to be here tomorrow. I'm going to be here for most of the time. So in the middle afternoon, I probably have to go. Does anybody want a brave soul want to ask a question or complain?
Is your iPad working?
That's right. Yes. Yeah, back here. Go ahead.
I'm one of these guys that regulate some of the folks you hire on the board.
Yeah.
Partners. Have you spoken with them lately? Because you need to.
With partners?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I actually speak a lot. It turns out it takes more than speaking, but I do. Let me see. I talked to John Meservey the other day. He's from Partners. He's one of their head facilities guys. What are you saying? They don't behave in this fashion, is what you're
Some of the
implying.
West Coast folks don't quite behave this way.
Yeah.
I'd like to see them, honestly.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of folks, and it's a struggle. And to imagine that all 14 years, everybody in my organization behaved like this, yeah, well, that had happened. But we worked pretty hard, and the reason I felt compelled to write the book is to show people you can live values, you can treat your staff well. I mean, in the middle of economic downturn, I turned to the staff and said, you know what, I'm not going to have a mass layoff. I mean, healthcare's doing it. I understand. Sometimes you have to do that. That's going to be my last choice. And if you work with me on this, we're going to get through it. And I don't think we're going to have layoffs. We did everything else we could. We did all these things. I said, who's going to take a beating? I went to the senior team. They said, well, I think we have to have layoffs. I said, well, it's going to start the senior team because you guys are worth a lot more money. And then they came up with ideas just like the architects. Who took the beating? I took the beating. I walked to the board and said, we will not have an operating margin the first 3 months of this year. It's going to be flat. In fact, the whole year might be flat. And they wagged their fingers at me and they gave me lectures about how to run organizations, although most of them were running much smaller than what I was doing. Not that that mattered, of course, but I just said, we're going to think long-term here, not short-term. This organization's been here 100 years, it's going to be another 100 years, and I'm not going to destroy it in that. So I didn't. I took the beating, month after month. And eventually we rose out of it. We came out of the economic downturn. When my book came out, I had a book signing for the staff. All kinds of people came, the senior people, the docs, the nurses, frontline people, billing clerks, environmental services people, came up, had me sign the book, and they would say to me things like, in 2008 and 9, you didn't fire us. You could have. You didn't. You had our back. We've had your back every day, every night, every weekend since then. Thanks. Well, it's pretty powerful. I mean, hardly gets any better than that. So I believe it works, and that's what I do now is try and help people in that. Thanks.